Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, the first weather graphic, hazardous weather. Not a lot on here. We still have the wind advisory out until 10 p.m. this evening for the eastern Alaska range. Antler Creek this afternoon reporting 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts out of the south, and also areas south of Fort Greely seeing 40 to 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And the areas there will continue to see 25 to 35-mile-an-hour winds with gusts of 50 until 10 p.m., which will die off, or they'll kick the advisory out longer. Moving on to the fire danger graphic here, not any fire danger on it. Both the areas here over the upper Yukon Valley and back here in the northwest from yesterday, those have fallen below the high fire danger category, so nothing to put on this chart today. Satellite imagery showing a lot of moisture coming into the central interior and then spreading eastward here along the warm front with that system pulling up along the southwest coast, and then the front here extending back along the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island. And you can see it's kind of fragmenting here, losing the moisture source. It's not a solid band of moisture streaming up any longer here, with the bulk of the rain shifting up into the interior. And that's due to development taking place farther down the frontal boundary there. You can kind of see the enhancement of the clouds there. So that's sapping the moisture out of this portion of the system. Out to the west, not a lot going on. Higher pressure starting to take over out in that area. And that's going to keep any storminess out there to the west and directed up to the northeast over the next couple of days. And you can see clouds on the increase here over the eastern North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle. Not much in the way of precipitation yet, but that'll increase tonight. On the chart here, again, dry day, maybe some partly sunny skies down over the southern Panhandle. Areas of rain, moderate along the western North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound. Also the upslope areas of the terrain like the western Alaska Range up in the interior there toward the Brooks Range. And back to the west where Iliamna picked up 0.8 of an inch of rain in the 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. Stony in the Alaska Range, 3/4 of an inch of rain. And then with the main low center, Nome had 2/3 of an inch of precipitation. So some areas seeing a fair amount, good soaking rains here across actually a fairly widespread area of the state. And then more showery conditions, less rainfall out here over the southwest interior. But Ikagik did pick up 0.4 of an inch there in northeast Bristol Bay. Windy conditions north side of this low center, about 30-mile-an-hour gusts out of the east at Kotzebue. Dead Horse here, east 25, a little bit of an increase there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. And the Kuskokwim Delta, breezy southwest winds, 30 to 35 miles an hour with Cape Newnham seeing gusts to 40 miles an hour. And winds kicking up 25 to 30-mile-an-hour gusts over the Pribilof Islands, but generally a dry day out there with both the shower activity with this trough up to the north and northeast. And again, not much going on for the Alaska Peninsula there. And for tonight, we'll see that continues. You may see some isolated showers along the north shores of the islands here from the Alaska Peninsula out toward Atka. Otherwise, generally dry, lots of clouds, IFR, marginal VFR under high pressure and stagnant conditions. Winds diminish here over the northern Bering Sea. And a weak trough out there tries to bring some moisture into the far western Aleutians. Otherwise, this system tracks northeastward, and several troughs rotating around that low will keep the western interior into the central interior kind of unsettled, wet, and breezy tonight with rain in many areas. Showers here over the upper the upper Tanana Valley, central Tanana Valley, behind the front. Rain North Gulf Coast, becoming moderate to possibly heavy over toward Yakutat up in this area here to Dry Bay. And then rain also on the increase over the northern Panhandle, to a lesser extent in the central, southeast coast, and then farther to the south, staying dry with just clouds. Looking at the outlook for tomorrow, here's that developing low center on the frontal boundary there. That's going to slide some moisture very close to Kodiak. I'd say decent chance of rain in the afternoon along the eastern side of Kodiak Island. And then that moisture along the older frontal boundary, which becomes a warm front here, that'll keep it wet over the central and northern Panhandle. Trying to stay dry down south, just some clouds and a risk of a sprinkle. Up in the interior, heaviest precipitation likely along this trough axis from that 1,002 millibar low. They're up just east of the border, and this 1,007 millibar low back toward the Noatak Valley. That'll probably be kind of a concentrated area of heavier showers, otherwise more scattered in nature into the central interior, becoming partly sunny in the afternoon for the Susitna Valley, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula areas, and risk of shower on the west side, Kodiak Island. More like the Aleutian Range, chance of showers. Basically dry here over the southwest interior. Lots of IFR, marginal VFR out over the Bering Sea with areas of fog. High pressure here keeping this system back to the northwest, and we'll be kicking it off to the northeast. And then for the outlook on Tuesday, got a system coming up from the south here, 994 millibar low. Fair distance in the afternoon from this western Aleutians there, but the front will push across late tomorrow night. It'll push across the Aleutians here and extend down across the Fox Islands for periods of rain and breezy winds on Tuesday, and also wet back out to the west there. High pressure shifts to the southwest coast over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Definitely dry conditions, western interior. Actually much less in the way of precipitation over all of interior Alaska, with possible sunshine from the Yukon Delta down into southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, possibly Kodiak Island, as well as the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet. Looking pretty good on Tuesday, as well as Copper River Basin, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast. Definitely dry, chance of sun, not so much up here in the interior along that trough in the central areas. Scattered showers become a little more numerous here as you head east toward the border, and then really scatter out off to the northwest. Dry for the North Slope and the Arctic coast with low clouds and fog up in those areas. This system pushes into the Panhandle with a fair amount of rain. So moderate to heavy possibly there over the central and southern southeast coast of that front, but becoming showery late in the day, probably not till Tuesday evening. And then that'll actually chance of rain all the way up to the north there, but it looks like it'll be dry for the Yakutat area on westward. And for the low temperatures tonight, 32, 33 or 4 on the eastern Arctic coast, a little below freezing, and the North Slope in the 30s, west side in the 30s, upper 40s, Kotzebue Sound, Seward Peninsula, all the way over to the border, and mid to upper 40s, Copper River Basin, lower 50s, south central Alaska down to Kodiak, and 50 to 55 for the Panhandle, near 50 for the Alaska Peninsula, upper 40s for the Aleutians, Pribilofs, and St. Lawrence Island. Highs tomorrow, 35 to 40 central eastern Arctic coast, 40 to 45 on the western coast, with mid-50s here through the central interior, and maybe some lower 60s, depending on how much sun breaks out and how soon here for the Susitna Valley. Earlier sunshine would push it up into the mid-60s, but it'll probably crack 60 degrees here from Kenai Peninsula up to Talkeetna and Trapper Creek. Lower 60s, Bristol Bay, 50s for the remainder of the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. And it looks like highs in the 60s to mid-60s over the southern southeast coast. And then for your, lows on Tuesday morning, back down to either side of the frost point there for the central and eastern Arctic coast and the North Slope, possibly some areas of the North Slope. Otherwise, you get in the Brooks Range, you're in the upper 30s. South of the mountains, 40s, upper 40s over the eastern areas, mid-40s back to the Seward Peninsula, and mid to upper 40s here for the Bering Sea, southwest coast areas. Also upper 40s for the Copper River Basin, 50 to 55 for the Panhandle. Highs, 60 to 65 for Bristol Bay, as well as the Kenai Peninsula, Susitna Valley, maybe the Matanuska Valley as well. Lower 60s over the southern Panhandle, and the interior, northern interior, still in the 50s, call it 55 to 60 from the upper Yukon Valley into the Tanana Valley, back to the west there to Galena, McGrath, Nikolai, upper 50s, cooling to near 50 there for St. Lawrence Island, mid to upper 30s for the eastern Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Now moving on to flying weather, you can see a lot of marginal and IFR here across the entire forecast area. All of the Arctic coast starting the day out Monday in the IFR zone southward into the northwest interior, all the way down here across the Kuskokwim Valley, Delta, and Yukon Delta into northeast Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, out to the Pribilofs, and more marginal along the southern Bering Sea and the Aleutians. IFR right up in along the east side of the Kenai Peninsula, up there to the north, mostly Prince William Sound eastward, all the way down the southeast coast here, along the coast, otherwise inland areas, a couple of zones of marginal VFR. For the afternoon, still socked in up there for the North Slope and Arctic coastal areas. Into the Koyukuk Valley, IFR maybe the northern Kobuk Valley, but marginal VFR here, Kotzebue Sound, Selawik, Noatak Valleys, central interior, but the extreme upper Tanana Valley, 40 Mile Country, looks VFR, as well as Cook Inlet from the southern Susitna Valley all the way down to northern Kodiak Island, marginal VFR over the southwest, and some IFR still for the Pribilofs northward, but well south of St. Lawrence Island. IFR here from the Gulf of Alaska in across just about all of the southeast coast and out over the far western Aleutians. For Tuesday morning, still IFR and a lot of it here from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, as well as looks like into the Kobuk Valley out toward Kotzebue, Seward Peninsula, northern Bering, southeastward here to the Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula. Mostly marginal here over the interior areas, and then some VFR, again Cook Inlet and northern Bristol Bay, Kamishak Bay, and the southern Kuskokwim Valley. IFR, all of the Panhandle and the eastern Gulf of Alaska and most of the Aleutians. For the afternoon Tuesday, improving here over southern Alaska. Looks like VFR breaking out from Bristol Bay and right along the Kuskokwim River across the southern valley there, as in Kuskokwim Valley and into south central Alaska, Prince William Sound, Copper River Basin, marginal VFR north and northwest of the Alaska Range, and improvement up here for the north slope on out to the Arctic coast with the IFR lifting northward, but still catching, looks like Point Barrow with IFR here from the Bering Strait, right down along the coast, pushing in toward Bristol Bay. Lots of IFR again, southern Bering and the Aleutians, and less IFR here for the Panhandle. Passes Anaktuvik tomorrow. Both Anaktuvik and Atigan look mostly IFR throughout the day. And Monday looking early IFR. Gradual improvement for both Lake Clark and Merrill to marginal VFR into the afternoon. Rainy, marginal VFR. Windy, same forecast. Isabel, marginal. And for Mentasta, look for some improvement from the morning to the afternoon. Probably starting out marginal, possibly going VFR in the afternoon. And for Tanita, marginal VFR, Portage, marginal, and for Chilkoot and White, IFR. Moving on to the freezing levels, we've got 12,000 feet here, still pretty warm air aloft there for the southeast coast. And actually, even southern Alaska, 8 to 10,000 feet, a little cooler back to the northwest, and interior here about 6,000 feet up to the Arctic coast, and the coolest out there over the western Aleutians at 4,000. And icing with moisture lifting northward here. Could be a zone of considerable moderate rime icing above about 6,000 feet there from the Brooks Range into the eastern southern north slope area. And then just isolated moderate here in the shaded areas right down, tapering off, really tapering off here as you get down toward the Aleutian Range, even Iliamna Lake. No icing for south central or Kenai Peninsula Cook Inlet area to the Talkeetnas. This zone sliding up, another batch of moisture clipping the east side of Kodiak with possible considerable moderate, but that's way up there above 10,000 feet, and some of that sliding into the northern Panhandle. Jet stream, upper level low tomorrow tracking into Bristol Bay, northeast Bristol Bay. And there's that 100-knot jet that's pulling that next batch of moisture up along Kodiak Island with a weak ridging through here off the southeast coast, weak ridging out over the central Aleutians, and at 9,000 feet, 25 to 30 knots cutting in across the Yukon Delta, up to 40 knots here across the upper Tanana Valley and over the White Mountains, 30 knots to the Brooks Range, and pretty windy 35 to 40 into the southeast coast, lighter for the Aleutians. High pressure here at 3,000 feet developing near the Fox Islands tomorrow afternoon, and not too bad in the winds, maybe up to 25 knots in the interior, 30 knots for the Panhandle. Turbulence, occasional moderate chop here for the southeast coast, southern Cook Inlet from Kamishak Bay into Iliamna and over the central interior.
Two parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Water. A drop can indicate coming rain. A mist can be refreshing. A river can power an entire community. The ocean can inspire awe in all of us. The forces of nature that create waves also create an inviting opportunity for wholesome entertainment. but on almost any beach in the country, the waves that come crashing ashore could also hide a dangerous and deadly force: the rip current. Few natural events are as powerful as rip currents. The rip current is the coming together of several different forces just a few feet from the beach. First, a sandbar appears offshore. Waves that would normally not break until hitting the beach instead break on the sandbar. The water from the waves is trapped by the sandbar and cannot move naturally back to sea. This creates water that funnels a fast-moving current away from shore. In that short time, anything or anybody caught in this flow of water can be pulled out in the current. That is where the danger comes in.
When a person gets caught in one, maybe they don't even know they're in one, but what's going to happen is they're going to find themselves getting further and further away from shore. If they find themselves in this situation, the first thing they need to do is not panic. That's the number one rule: don't panic.
Even the strongest and most skilled swimmers can get caught in a rip current. Nationally, more than 100 deaths a year are attributed to rip currents. About 75% of all lifeguard rescues are rip current rescues. Swimmers can find themselves in a hopeless situation if they don't recognize the signs of a rip current and know how to escape its grasp.
The rip currents are fairly slow to form. It depends on the shoreline. Some areas they're very persistent in one place, and other areas they move around all the time. In most beaches, they're not dangerous or present most of the time. It's only under fairly brief periods of time where they really become a threat to people and swimmers.
By knowing the different forces that cause a rip current, you can tell with some certainty where one is flowing away from the beach. But even with that skill, it's always good to swim near a lifeguard station and check with the lifeguard to see if a rip current exists where you plan to swim. The first sign is the sandbar offshore, where you'll see breaking waves in a shallow area. If you see a sandbar, start searching for the other elements that make up a rip current. If one exists, you'll see water and sea foam moving through breakers and farther offshore. You'll then see different colored water beyond the surf. The water will actually highlight the narrow currents.
There are a lot of subtle indicators that a rip current is present and that it may be a threat. Some of those indicators are more turbid or dirtier water that shows up with farther outside the surf zone particularly. You see it out beyond the breakers, and that's a good indicator that there may be a rip current present.
Rip currents can occur anywhere along the shoreline. Swimmers should be especially cautious around jetties or piers. But there is one warning sign that will leave you with no doubt. When you see warning flags, which can differ in look and style from beach to beach, it means one thing: don't swim. The rip current can kill.
The red flags are there for your safety. Each morning, each one of the beach patrol services on the Outer Banks has a supervisor who gets up and checks the water conditions. If we feel like the water conditions are such that are a danger to your personal safety, we put the red flags up.
Ultimately, there may be a time when you become caught in the rip current. If you're caught in a rip current, the one key rule to remember is to not swim against it. Swim parallel to the shore. You'll either swim out of the current or swim until the current itself dissipates.
A lot of people think that when they're in a rip current, they can't get back to shore, and that scares them. And they think that they can't get back to shore where they are and also all up and down the beach, and that's not true. It's just maybe 50 yards wide where the rip current is. If you swim parallel 50 yards one way or the other with the beach, it doesn't matter, then it's a lot easier to swim back to shore.
Most rip currents dissipate after about 50 to 75 yards. Then you can swim parallel to the shore. Do not hesitate to wave to get help. Drop by drop, the ocean's water is enjoyable, powerful, and at times can be dangerous. The beaches of the Atlantic are some of the most beautiful in the country and provide enough physical challenges and pure fun to enjoy without risking your life by swimming in a rip current. Study the facts and be careful. Parents should make themselves aware of the conditions of the water before letting their children swim. And when children are swimming, parents should keep a sharp eye on them all the time. We want you to enjoy your time in the waters of the Atlantic. But before you do, check the conditions. Make sure no rip current or any other dangerous conditions exist by checking with the lifeguard.
I think the best thing that people can do is always find out where the lifeguard stand is, swim in front of the lifeguard stand, and when you get onto the beach, before you get in the water, walk up to the lifeguard, ask them, are there any problems with the water that day?
When you come down on vacation, you just really need to be smart about the ocean. Speak to your lifeguard, and by understanding is your best defense against this ocean, and understanding can be talking to that lifeguard.
Swim with a buddy, swim in your ability, and don't take chances. We want everybody to come down and have a good time and leave safe.
It's an easy thing to do, and when you are sure the water is safe, the ocean will be yours to cool off in and enjoy for years to come.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. This area of heavier ice continuing to slowly melt away, and this area to a slower melt back and extending down in toward the eastern coast there. But that's starting to get pretty thin, while this area of sea ice 3 water continues to expand and slowly expand westward. And about the same trend in the sea ice expected for the next 5 days. Coastal water forecast: southeast coast, west winds 20 knots up the north side here, up to 25 10-foot seas. Light northwest winds for Stevens Passage, south 20 for, northwest winds on the light side at 10 for Clarence Strait. Stevens Passage south at 20. Small craft advisories there, 30-knot winds for Lynn Canal. And then those swing around to the north, fall down to 15 knots there for Lynn Canal. Southeast 15 for Stevens Passage. Small craft advisories there for the Clarence Strait area, that next front pushing in. And small craft advisories west 30 knots behind the front there along the south coast. Northwest 25 and diminishing to 20 knots up north, with these seas still hanging at 11 feet and 12 feet in the south coast. Prince William Sound, light southwest winds tomorrow, southwest 20 to 25 for the North Gulf Coast, 10 to 11-foot seas, southwest 20 for the Barren Islands, seas at 9 feet, west 15, 4-foot seas for Kamishak Bay, and for Cook Inlet, south to southwest at 20 with 5 to 6-foot seas. And then those become lighter on Tuesday, out of the northwest at 10, 2 to 3-foot seas for the inlet, west 30, good small craft advisories for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, and northwest 20 here for the North Gulf Coast, seas at 7 feet, 15 knots out of the northwest for Prince William Sound, seas at about 3 feet. And for Kodiak Island, southwest winds 20 to 25 knots, strongest on the east side here where seas will be 9 feet. Sitkinak to Castle Cape northwest 25, seas at 10 feet, and west winds on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula at 10, north 15, south side, and Bristol Bay west at 20. Going ahead to Tuesday, light north winds for Bristol Bay, northeast 15 there on the north side of the peninsula. Pacific side, east 15, 8-foot seas, Castle Cape to Sitkinak, northwest 15, 20 knots out of the west for the Kodiak Island marine zones. And for the far western Aleutians, or those western zones, south to southeast at about 15 with 5-foot seas. Easterlies only 10 to 15 here for the central Aleutians with 4 to 6-foot seas. And variable winds 10 to 15 for the Fox Islands. Outlook for Tuesday, pick up in those conditions there with that next front pushing in. We've got east to southeast at 20 to 30 knots there for the Fox Islands. Those seas 5 to 9 feet. 30-knot east-southeasterlies for Adak and Atka, seas 9 to 11 feet, and east winds 30 knots until you get out to Kiska Island. They fall back to 20 knots from there to Shimia. Southwest coast, west 15 to 20 knots here tomorrow, and light southerlies for the Pribilofs with seas at 5 feet. Southwest 20 for the St. Matthew Island area, 20 knots out of the west here from Nunivak Island on up to St. Lawrence Island. West 25 for Norton Sound, so small craft advisories there. Those come down to 15 on Tuesday, as well as St. Lawrence Island. North 10 here along the coast. Southeast 20 for the Pribilof. South 15 St. Matthew Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow. East winds 20 knots, turning northeast on the central coast, then back to east on the west side. And north to northwest here 10 to 15 for the Chukchi Sea. And Tuesday, west at 10, lighter and westerly for the eastern coastline, and southwest 15 here for the central coast, west 15 or west-northwest 15 knots, west side with the northwest winds from Cape Beaufort down to the Bering Strait. And for tonight, again, this low tracks northeastward up to about this position at roughly 3 to 4 a.m. in the morning at about 1,000 millibars. Look for periods of rain through this area and along the front, up and along south of the Brooks Range. Some of that's spilling over to the north slope, becoming showery over the eastern interior. Look for a rainfall to increase on the eastern North Gulf Coast as well as the northern Panhandle. Several troughs rotating around the main low center here will keep periods of showers and occasionally breezy conditions in these areas in toward the central interior, but dramatically drying out back to the west. As you can see, high pressure taking over the Aleutian areas and the Bering Sea. And rain on the Alaska Peninsula will end tomorrow as this low tracks south of the area there, but we'll keep a chance of rain on the east side of Kodiak. And then for the next day, heaviest weather will be over the southeast coast and out in the Aleutians.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.